Hello and welcome to the Full English. This is a story for B2 learners, so I'll speak a little more naturally today, closer to the way British people really talk. You can follow the words on the screen or just sit back and listen. At the end, I'll explain some of the more subtle language from the story, the things British people say and what they really mean underneath. Ready? Here we go. When Daniel moved into his new flat, he didn't expect to make friends quickly. He'd heard all the stereotypes about the British. Reserved, polite but distant, friendly enough on the surface, but slow, very slow to actually let you in. His friends back home had warned him. Don't expect anyone to invite you round, they said. It takes years. They'll talk about the weather with you for a decade before they learn your name. So, on his first morning in the new flat, surrounded by cardboard boxes and bubble wrap, Daniel wasn't expecting much. He made himself a cup of coffee, sat down on the sofa and started to unpack. The building was quiet, almost too quiet. Through the walls, he could hear the faint sound of a radio somewhere and a door closing. He wondered, not for the first time, whether he'd made a mistake moving to a new city, to a building where he knew absolutely no one. He worked through the morning, unpacking books and plates and mugs, and then, just before lunch, there was a knock at the door. Daniel wasn't expecting anyone. He carefully made his way through the boxes and opened the door a little cautiously. Standing on the landing was an older woman, small, neat, with kind eyes and grey hair pinned carefully up. In her hands she held a small plate, covered with a sheet of foil. "Hello, dear," she said. "I'm Margaret from number 4, just across the landing. I saw the removal van yesterday, so I thought I'd pop over and introduce myself. I've brought you a few biscuits. Nothing fancy." "Oh," said Daniel, surprised. "That's really kind of you. Thank you." "Well, it's just a little something," said Margaret, waving her free hand as if it were nothing at all. "Moving's exhausting, isn't it? I won't keep you. You must have 1,001 boxes to sort out." Daniel took the plate and thanked her again, and Margaret gave a little nod and disappeared back into number 4. Later, when he stopped for a break, Daniel peeled back the foil. Underneath were biscuits, but not the sort you buy in a packet from the shop. These were homemade, golden, buttery, still faintly warm from the oven and dusted with a little sugar. They smelt incredible. He tried one, and it was, honestly, one of the best biscuits he had ever eaten in his life. And Margaret had called them nothing fancy. The next day, Daniel passed Margaret again on the landing. This time he was ready. "Margaret, those biscuits were absolutely delicious. You really didn't have to go to all that trouble." "Oh, they were nothing," she said, but he could see she was pleased. "I had the oven on anyway. No sense in wasting the heat." Daniel saw his chance and took it. "Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? I warn you, the place is still a complete mess, but I have found the kettle at least." Margaret's face softened. "Oh, go on then," she said. "Just a quick one. I won't stay long." She stepped inside. Daniel cleared 2 boxes off the sofa so she could sit down, and went to make the tea. "Milk, no sugar?" she asked. And as the kettle boiled, they began to talk. They talked about the weather. That came first, as it always does. Then they moved on to the building itself. Margaret told him, in a soft, confidential voice, which neighbours were absolutely lovely and which ones were a bit much. She warned him about the bins. "Thursday mornings, don't miss it or you'll be waiting a fortnight, and the smell in the summer doesn't bear thinking about." She told him the best place to buy bread, the corner shop to avoid, and the name of the large ginger cat that would, she promised, sooner or later appear on his windowsill, demanding food and attention. None of it was dramatic. There were no deep confessions, no big emotional speeches, just tea and a plate of leftover biscuits, and the small, ordinary, comfortable details of a shared building on a quiet street. And just a quick one quietly turned into an hour and a half. Eventually, Margaret glanced at her watch and looked genuinely startled. "Goodness, is that the time? I've been talking your ear off. I really must let you get on with your unpacking." She stood and Daniel walked her to the door. "Thank you for the tea, dear," she said, "and welcome. It's nice to have a bit of young life in the building again." Then, as she stepped out onto the landing, she paused, one hand on the doorframe, as if something had just occurred to her. "You know," she said, not quite looking at him, "I usually put the kettle on around 4 most afternoons. If you're ever at a loose end, well, you know where I am." "I'd like that," said Daniel. "Same time next week?" "Go on then," said Margaret, with a small, pleased smile. "I'll do a fresh batch of biscuits, the proper ones, mind, not this shop rubbish." And she disappeared back into number 4. Daniel closed the door and stood for a moment in his half-unpacked flat. He thought about what his friends had told him, that the British take years to let you in, that they'll talk about the weather for a decade before they learn your name. And then he thought about Margaret, who had knocked on his door with homemade biscuits on his second morning and had already, somehow, invited him round for tea most afternoons. He understood something now, something his friends had got slightly wrong. The British don't always say, "I'd like to be your friend." They rarely announce it directly. Instead, they show it, quietly, sideways, without any fuss, with a plate of biscuits described as nothing fancy, with a knock on the door, with an invitation that arrives disguised as, "You know where I am," and always with the kettle going on. The reserved British neighbour, it turned out, wasn't so reserved after all. You just had to know how to read her. Thanks for listening to the end. Did you understand everything in today's story? Here's a language recap if you're looking for some context. This story was full of subtle, very British language, so let's go over the most important bits. The big one is understatement, describing something as smaller or less important than it really is. Margaret's homemade biscuits were wonderful, but she called them nothing fancy and just a little something. Why? Because in Britain, showing off is frowned upon. Being modest is polite. So when a British person plays something down, listen carefully. It might actually be rather impressive or something they're proud of. Next up, pop over and pop round is a casual, friendly way to say quick visit. It's very common. Then the tea. Put the kettle on. In Britain, tea is the answer to almost everything. Good news, bad news, a new neighbour. Offering tea is offering friendship. And just a quick one. Margaret said she'd only stay a minute and then stayed for an hour and a half. This is a very British habit, politely pretending you can't stay long so you don't feel like you're imposing and then happily settling in. Finally, the indirect invitation. If you're ever at a loose end, you know where I am. At a loose end means you're free with nothing to do. Margaret didn't say, "Please come round." That would be too direct. She hinted, and learning to hear those hints is a real skill in British English. Listen again tomorrow, and this language will start to feel natural. And tell me in the comments, in your country, how do people welcome a new neighbour? Directly or more like Margaret? For more British English, give this video a like and subscribe. Thanks for listening and see you next time.